Good day. Today, I want to talk about how some policies, countries, and corporations and entities take can lead them to self-harm. I want to start with the Chinese general Admiral Zheng He. Zheng He was an admiral that is considered to be one of the greatest maritime forces this world has ever known. Between 1405 and 1433, he led an armada of ships from the Ming Dynasty, China, and he visited cities all across Asia, and he even was said to have visited the eastern ports in eastern part of Africa over, I think, 7 voyages or more. Eventually, that same Ming Dynasty closed up China, put up a policy where they limited trade and interaction with the foreign world, and they continued with this policy right late into the 19th century when the British and the Europeans arrived and forced trade on them and forced them to open up because they really didn't have an army or a navy then. They didn't have comparative things to what the British had and what the Europeans had. And they fought 2 opium wars. And one of the outcome of those opium wars was that China ceded Hong Kong and even Macau and was forced to start to trade with the foreign countries then. Another reality that brings self-harm to people is another one is let's take the case of America. China did not open up for a long time, even under the communist regime of Mao Zedong. They did not open up. And when one new communist leader, Deng Xiaoping, came up, he decided that he was going to open up China. That was a very radical policy. It took several years of China being a communist country, but he opened up China, and when he opened up China, they started having places called special economic zones, and Guangdong was one of them. Shenzhen was one of them. Over time, we have the reality that is China today. But it wasn't the fact that the Chinese opened up and built these special economic zones. No, it was the fact that at just that same time, America started to implement some policies that led to the reality America finds itself in today. One, they started offshoring their manufacturing, looking for cheaper labor in those special economic zones. They had already done that in shipping out some to Taiwan, shipping already to Korea, but China particularly presented a new reality for them, a new opportunity. And they did that. They started sending up their factories to Guangdong. They started with Guangdong. Today, China has several special economic zones. They have taken that concept of special economic zones to develop China into the manufacturing superpower it is today. And who lost? It was America. America did not only offshore its manufacturing to China, it's also sent it to Mexico, sent it to Korea, sent it to Taiwan, sent it all over the world. Cities like Detroit and all the cities of the Northeast that were huge manufacturing centers lost their manufacturing. Well, they were not helped by the fact that most of the policies, because those parts of the Northeast were mainly Democratic-led states and cities, they made policies that exacerbated manufacturing. If you find any manufacturing in America now, it usually is in the southern part of America, Alabama, Kentucky, Texas, and also in California. Mainly because that in California has to do with the military-industrial complex and the rocketry that America still is very superior at. One corporate entity that takes this concept of self-harm to a new level was Kodak. Kodak was the one who invented the digital camera as we know today, but Kodak was already selling so much of films. Growing up, we knew of Fiji films and we know of Kodak films. Kodak was the world leader in films. So they just didn't take that new changing reality that one of their own employees invented. And over time, somehow, digital cameras came, established itself, and Kodak lost its preeminent position in the world. Now everybody just uses cameras. Their camera is now on their phone. Digitalization has changed the world. So it is also very clear that right before us, we are seeing an entity, a whole region, a continent, doing to itself self-harm in a way that you just cannot believe. Why do I say this? At this point in time now, we have a situation where Europe has decided to go to war with Russia on using Ukraine as its excuse. And this war has led to serious changes in the structure of the European economy. This war has led to the Europeans chose to completely cut off their relationship with the Russians. And in doing so, they did something they spite their face. They cut their nose to spite their face. At the heart of European economy for the past 40 to 50 years has been cheap Russian gas. Cheap access to Russian gas and Russian oil and Russian hydrocarbon assets. Because Russia is very rich. It was so rich that some countries disrespect. One particular senator disrespected Russia and called Russia a gas station masquerading as a nuclear power. That is how rich they are. They have so much of oil and gas assets. And because of that, the Germans, the Europeans, the Italians all benefited from access to this resource. But when they decided to start to put sanctions and decided to start to cut off their relationship with Russia, what do we have? Russia pivoted very fast to a new reality nobody contended with. Because in all truth, in all the assumptions that the European leaders were making, none of them thought that the Chinese would be too glad to take on this new found resource that was just thrown to their way. You see, while the world pivoted and while the Europeans were going green and talking a lot about how they want to be green and how they want to, natural gas is a base component of a lot of petrochemical products. And if we know the German economy, it is not only the fact that it is a powerful source and powerful base of machinery and innovative products as in electronics and machinery, it is the fact that they are the world leading in chemical production and petrochemicals production. Some of the world's most renowned companies in production of chemicals, one particularly, BASF, is a German company, many others. So the gas is a component that is a base for something like fertilizer, base for so many other products I don't even know, but it is a very powerful product. Because even though it is now being shipped to China, China is now using that to grow their own petrochemical industry. Because we should know that China has solved and cracked the solution to production of energy. Renewables is what they have gone. They now produce by far more solar power. They have electrified the economy using solar power, renewables, wind energy, and then they also are building hydro plants all over, hydroelectric plants all over. They are building dams. They have the Three Gorges Dam, and now they're even building a dam across the rivers in Tibet, said to be much bigger and will produce 3 times the power that the Three Gorges Dam even produces. Everything that the Chinese have been doing have been moving towards electrifying the economy. So now they have electric energy, they have high-speed rail, and because of that, even when there are periods when there's a strain in the price, in the production and availability of oil and gas, the Chinese don't really bother much because the economy and the cars within their country don't particularly need it anymore, but they still need it for the production of petrochemical products, especially in these days when you have carbon fiber as a very important product in military, in robotics, in semiconductors. So natural gas is still a very, very important product to the world, and the Europeans have lost it. Today, something happened that shows you that the Europeans have chosen a path that is a clear indication of self-harm. They signed a deal put on them by the Americans today. Today, after visiting the Chinese and getting such a very cold and reception in China and Beijing, the European Union president scuttled off to Scotland to go and we use a word to go and meet with, for the lack of a nicer way of putting, with President Donald Trump, who incidentally is in Scotland now. And there they conceded to a lot of concessions for the Americans. Those concessions include 15% tariffs for all European products that are coming from wherever, and then the fact that the economy will now be open to American agricultural products and American oil and gas. In fact, there was a figure stated to the American oil and gas, $700 billion is what Europe is expected to take up in buying American oil and gas every time. They are also expected to purchase vast amount of military equipment. The EU is to open up its markets to American agriculture and then whatever goods America decides to send to it. So at a time that they are being squeezed by the Chinese, because now the Chinese products are getting to be much more cheaper, more technologically superior, and much more available because of the control all the supply chains, the Europeans are also expected to open up their economy, which is not competitive by any means anymore, to the Americans. So Ursula von der Leyen met with President Trump, and this is what came out of it. The situation with Europe has only one thing. They will be non-competitive anymore. They just can't be. America is squeezing them. In a previous video, I had said America and China are squeezing Europe into oblivion. But if anything has done Europe more damage, it is their commitment, their unrelenting, their possession, the complete possession that Europe has had, and the consumption, the way the Ukraine war has consumed Europe and the leaders in Europe for the past 3 years. In fact, this reality called Donald Trump and the Chinese growth has been what has made them realize that there are other issues to discuss, like trade. Donald Trump has brought up the trade issue, and China has also brought up the rare earth mineral issue. So they had to drop every other thing and go and try and sort out these matters. In fact, to tell you that the Ukrainian project is souring in the mouths of Europe, it was just announced that European Union suspends 1.7 billion in aid to Ukraine after Zelensky curbed the watchdog agencies, the independence of the anti-corruption agencies, NAPU and SAPU. The European Union cut their aid to Ukraine that is supposed to support all those idealistic democratic processes by this amount, by 1/3. And it may have just been the realization that they are going to lose a lot of money and a lot of support that made the Ukrainian president to make out a statement that they are going to reverse the law. Already it is being said that the members of parliament who are in support of from his party don't particularly want the Sabu and Napu to have their independence back, because the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office have initiated a lot of investigation into primarily people in the servant of the People's Party, that is President Zelensky's party. And for that reason, they have their reservations against getting them to be independent again. They want them back to be under the Prosecutor General's office in the presidency of Zelensky. So this is the reality they are now finding themselves. But the Europeans also went to China to go and talk about Ukraine, and it was not even a topic that the Chinese were about to listen to. The Chinese have become a little bit aggressive when they are accused about supporting Russia. Wang Yi had already said in a meeting with Kaya Kallas that the Chinese have an interest in making sure that Russia does not lose the war. And when at the United Nations, the new United Nations, the new ambassador to the United Nations, or one of the officers of America, the representative in the Security Council for America there, accused the Chinese that they are finding Chinese components in drones. They are finding Chinese components in a lot of military hardware being used by the Russians. The Chinese pushed back. The UN Security Council meeting, at that place, the acting US ambassador Dorothy Sher accused Beijing of secretly aiding Moscow and urged China to stop fueling Russia's aggression in Ukraine. The Chinese didn't take it easy. They say this is a much more emboldened and a much more assertive China we now have. And instantly, the Chinese made their pronouncement. They accused the Americans of fueling the war, that it is them who is giving weaponry to the Ukrainians, and it is them who are responsible for this war lasting as long as it has gone on. And it is this pushback and this assertiveness that is also making the military planners in the West to be worried, because just as they have NATO, and just as they have tried to use NATO to hold down Russia, some other people have tried to use NATO to hold down China. In fact, the concept of expanding NATO to become to become part of to extend its influence to the East, so that they can put in Japan and Korea, cover for Japan, Korea, and possibly Philippines in their agenda, has been discussed recently. But the Chinese, being assertive as they are now, have also decided that they're going to form their own. They have formed already their own organizations, and they are going to now become a counterweight to them, to NATO. Already, because of the success of the Chinese in trading with the ASEAN, they are their biggest trading partner with 1 trillion in trade last year. A lot of countries now see the benefit of being good neighbors to China. Because even though China has strong neighbors within its own territory, it is wooing them and increasing its influence through trade. All the countries have found out that it is in their best interest to be in the good books of China. But China is not relenting. This Shanghai Cooperation Organization and even the BRICS are institutions they are using to extend their influence and extend their reach in trade, innovation, and so many other things. China has moved ahead and become one of those entities that have created new realities. The biggest constraint to the development of countries have always been power and energy, either in the form of manpower or in the form of steam power, electricity, and China has become a very powerful producer of power. They use renewable energy to produce power, and because of that, they are now a major player in the world, because it's this power that drives industries. And while Americans are forcing Europeans to come and invest in America, because one of the outcomes of this deal is that the Europeans should increase their investment in US to the tune of almost 500 billion or 600 billion. The same too is expected of Japan, to increase their investment in America by 600 billion. Taiwan has already said they're going to invest 100 billion. So now Trump wants everybody to invest. But for the Chinese, they don't need to tell anybody. The supply chains are in China. Electricity is cheaper in China. The market is also in China. China is a very compelling destination for most of the countries without needing to have to pay exorbitant or to be coerced to come into the Chinese space. The only thing they need to meet up with is Chinese regulatory requirement, which many of them already are very willing to meet up with, because when they do the profit analysis, it's always in their interest to invest in China. And China has become a destination that, though they don't coerce, they are slowly beginning to defund. Deindustrialize Europe. Chinese too are on their own investing outside. They invest in Mexico, in Brazil. They invest even in Europe. But unfortunately, they are reducing their investments in these three countries that have become belligerent in the Ukrainian war. They are reducing their investments in Germany, France, and Britain. This is all the realities of the self-harm that Europe has done to itself. This is where I end my video for today. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any opinions about what I've discussed in this video, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. See you in my next video.